Rolling. Okay. Oh, I should have got a tissue. Oh, man. I'm not used to being sick. All right. Well, it's time. This is a show where even if you're sick, even if you're dying, the show must go on. Right, Noah?
That was the motto of the U.S. Postal Service.
And I'm trying to bring it energy, and I'm coughing. Yes! Oh, yeah, we're back with the podcast engineering show. I am your under-the-weather host, Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for a lot of big companies and mid-sized companies, too, like Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet and E+. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We really talk shop. We get into the audio engineering aspects of podcast production. We go deep. This isn't, I'll just plug in a mic and talk. We're going deep on this show. You probably know that. You probably listen every week. Thank you to our listeners who listen every week. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and when I entered podcasting 4 years ago, actually now almost 6 years ago, I noticed a huge lack of audio fundamental knowledge in the world of podcasting. And it's not surprising that podcasters don't have a really good handle on audio engineering, but even podcast producers usually don't have any fundamental training or basis, so that's what this show's for. I'm bringing all my experience to you so you can use it. And if you use the best of what you learn here, you will engineer and produce your shows faster and at a much better sound quality. And of course, Barry is here with me. Barry, I'm sick, man.
That's frightening.
It's not. Is it frightening? Are you sick, Barry?
No way.
No. See, I'm not going to be able to laugh, Noah. I'm just going to cough this whole episode.
Yeah, well, that's dedication, though, showing up anyway.
Oh, and I called it an episode. Dang. I think, Noah, and I'm going to introduce my guest in a second, but Noah, I think that was the dumbest thing I ever did with this show is that I wanted to, instead of episodes, I wanted to call each one a session. Because, recording session, audio engineering, like an episode it's not really an episodic podcast. I mean, from one to the next, they don't connect to each other really. So I thought, I'll call them sessions. But then almost every episode or session, I call it an episode, and that's not right.
Well, if you're going to call yours episodes, I'm going to start calling mine experiences.
Dude, experience
Epic
number
experience
81.
Number 1. Yeah, exactly.
All right, Noah Chelliah, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're the president at Altispeed, which is an IT company, and we're going to hear the story. I want to hear the story of how you went from IT company and how you got into radio and podcasting, and then we're going to talk about all your equipment because you're doing a lot, and you're doing it at a very high level, actually. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you built your broadcast studio using 100% Linux, and that's an operating system, right? Linux?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, just to make sure that I know what I'm talking about and the listeners know what we're talking about. Of course, you have the Mac OS, and then, of course, you have Windows, and Linux is another one, which is kind of rare, right, in computers overall.
At least if for desktop, yeah. I mean, in servers, I think, you use Linux every day. You just don't realize it. If you've used Google, eBay, Amazon, they're all running 100% Linux. On the servers, it's very prolific. On desktops, not so much. But I look at it as a cheaper, more stable, more friendly alternative to macOS or Windows.
See, that's cool. All right. So, and then you have your studio, and you actually broadcast from your studio, and you send the signal to an FM radio station, and it gets broadcast from there. And you also have a setup for when you're on the road. Check this out, because we talked before the show for 5 minutes, and I was really happy to find out that when you're on the road, you're actually sending back to your studio uncompressed audio.
That's right. We care about quality at the Ask Noah Show.
That's right. The Ask Noah Show. It's on radio and a podcast. So let's just start with the speed round because, there's no better place to start, Noah. When you're in studio and you're about to record a show, and obviously you when you do your show, you broadcast it over the radio, but you also record it and later you publish it as a podcast, just to spell it out for everybody. When you're getting ready to do it, take us through your whole signal chain from your microphone all the way through to where you're recording it, and then even your editing and software, and all the way up until you make the final MP3.
All right. So we'll start actually with the microphone arm, because I think sometimes that's overlooked. I'm using YellowTec microphone arms, mica arms, and what I really like about them is I'm moving the microphone around right now, and you might be able to hear my voice coming in and out of the mic because I'm moving it up and down, but you don't actually hear the boom stand moving at all. Right. And there's no boing spring, but I can move it anywhere. And that's been, I think, a really integral part to the actual comfortability of when I'm actually sitting here actually doing a show, because the microphone follows me around everywhere, and I can mount monitors and stuff like that to the actual post in the desk. On the end of the microphone arm, usually it's an RE20. Today I'm using a PR40. That goes from the microphone into the back of the Axia mix engine. And if you're not familiar with what the Axia is, it's basically a gigantic IP mixer. The nice thing about the Axia is it does all of the signal processing right inside of the mix engine itself. So instead of going into, like a lot of people would go into like a mic preamp, like a Symmetrix or a DBX, that's where you'd get your compression and stuff like that. I can do all of the compression, equalization, gating, de-essing, all of that happens inside of the mix engine. And then from the mix engine, it goes out to a distribution amplifier, and that distribution amplifier then connects to two different sources. One source is a broadcast machine that's running the Open Broadcaster software that we use to stream on the internet, and the second source is connected with AES-3, and it's going to a box called a Tieline, which is a IP audio encoder, and that is then sent. It encodes our audio and sends it over the internet, raw PCM audio over the internet, to the radio station, which also has a Tieline, and that's how the show is broadcast over the air.
That is cool. Uncompressed audio over the internet. Well, we're gonna really get into that. So, all right. So then, when you're local, how do you actually record it locally?
So we record it three different ways, really. There's the first way is inside of Open Broadcaster Suite, we record a copy of the audio as well as the video for the podcast, because these days exposure comes from YouTube. People want something to look at, and so we have the interactive chat room or maybe a little webcam up, and so that encodes the video, and we always record the audio there. But the primary source recording of the audio is done with a Marantz network audio recorder, and that sits in the rack right behind me, and essentially and that's coming off of that distribution amplifier too, and essentially that is what records the raw wave files that we then use to actually produce the show, or that goes up, for the reruns used for the radio station.
Got it. Okay, so you recorded on the Marantz. That's your main recorder, and then what kind of post-production do you do? Do you edit? Do you and again, we're still in the speed round, so take us through quick the editing. Sure. and all the post-production.
Yeah, there's really not much post-production done. Again, the nice thing about the Axia mix engine is that everything, what comes out onto the recorder is basically very refined. Everything is leveled. Everything is tweaked in live. So, and we have to do that to a certain degree because it has to sound good when it's live on the air. Right. And we have phone calls, and we have people that are coming in over Skype and stuff like that. And so we've got to make sure that all of their levels are adjusted, and we can do that all inside of the Axia.
Okay, so then when you record it on the Marantz, then literally you don't really do any editing. Then you just convert it to an MP3?
Yeah, it goes into Audacity. It gets exported as an MP3, and that gets put up on Fireside for distribution, as well as we do take. I guess here there is some production in we take the video and strip out the audio portion and use the better audio that we record for the YouTube stream.
Okay, right. So instead of you're recording the audio and video in OBS, but you're replacing that OBS audio with the local Marantz audio.
Right, and we structured everything from the beginning so that all of the video assets would all be compatible with the Linux workflow. So I use Lightworks as my nonlinear video editor, and so I can produce the entire show in in Lightware. To be fair, as a disclaimer, the production of like the video thing that goes up on YouTube and stuff like that, that's all handled by the podcast network. So they actually take that and edit it, and they have their own workflow for that. But it was the entire show from its conception was designed in a way that if at any point in time I want to or need to, I can implement that workflow. I can take over that part of the job, no problem.
Okay. All right. Well, this is awesome. So that was a great speed round. I like that. It's so different from really any other guest that's been on the show before. So we're going to pick through all that, but first I want to talk about how you built your studio using Linux. Now, just tell us how you did that and like how many computers do you have there?
Yeah, so it's what I did another podcast before this. I did a podcast called the Linux Action Show, and that was the first studio that I built because I needed a space that I could go to. Because the problem, Chris, is I run a business, a full-time business, and I'm a major integral part of that business, and so I don't have a lot of spare time. So if I'm going to do a podcast for my pleasure, I have to be able to walk into a place, sit down, do the show, and then walk out. I don't have time to troubleshoot and build and set things up and put things away, that kind of thing. And so the first studio I built was centered around video because we were doing a video show for YouTube. And the problem with that is you don't want the audio console in front of you. You don't want big microphone arms. You want everything kind of out of the way because it doesn't look good on camera. Well, the problem was when I went to do a radio show, you get a caller that's a little bit low. I would just want to reach over and I want to lift his levels up a little bit. Or you have somebody with a car alarm going off. I just want to mute that guy for a second. And I couldn't do that in my old studio. So we said, okay, what is the best way to build a broadcast grade audio studio? And so we started looking at boards. And the Axia came up pretty quick early on as kind of the go-to gold standard of audio boards because everything is networked and it does everything inside of the mix engine and it's incredibly expandable. There's no point that I can't grow. If I want to add sources, stuff like that, I can always do that. So we landed on the Axia pretty quick and that has been amazing. As far as actual computers, there's the computer that sits directly in front of me. We call it the guest PC. And so essentially that's how I connect to guests if I have a Skype guest or a Mumble guest. It also handles our call control software. So that's how I can put if I have like 7 callers inside of the queue, my call screener listens to the calls and then puts a description of what they want to talk about or their question. And then I can choose which caller I want to put on the air or which one I want to put back on hold so they can hear me, but they can't talk, which is a great way to be able to segue out of a call or into a call. And then the computer over to my left is, like I said, that broadcast machine that's running the Open Broadcaster software that's actually putting me live onto YouTube. The computer next to that is what we call our playout PC, and that is basically running a glorified playlist that plays the intro music, the outro music, cues me for the break, stuff like that. And then over to the left of that, we have a sound effects machine, which is basically for if I have an audio file or a pre-recorded piece of audio, it plays out on that machine.
Wow, you got a big setup, man. It's awesome. So within Linux now, talk to me about software. Like, can you is Pro Tools and Reaper and SoundForge, does any software make software for Linux?
Yeah. So as far as I know, there's no Pro Tools for Linux, but Reaper is available on Linux, and I've used it heavily. And it's a really fantastic piece of software. Audacity is actually, I think, underutilized sometimes. It's a lean, mean trimming machine. It's not great if you want to apply a lot of effects, if you want to do a lot of processing, but if you're just trying to capture raw audio of a recording, my go-to almost is always Audacity because it's really quick and easy. But Reaper can do the same thing. And I tend to use Reaper a lot if I'm going to clean audio up. If I have a guest that came in and, maybe he's recording on a laptop mic or something like that, and it doesn't sound good, and I need to clean up echo or I need to clean some of that up, usually I'll do that inside of Reaper.
So does Linux look a lot different? Like I don't even know what Linux looks like. Is the user experience easy?
Yeah, so I tell you what, so it's interesting. The Linux has a bunch of different looks because Linux is not all one thing. There are different versions, so to speak, of Linux. And one of a good friend of mine actually, who has a very popular version, if you want to call it that, of Linux, actually has a little menu inside of it that you can tell it, I want it to look like Windows, I want it to look like Mac OS, I want it to look like what the old quote-unquote Linux used to look like, and you can pick and it will rearrange the entire desktop to kind of meet the way that you expect it to look.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Right? Okay, so Linux sounds cool. Now, is it, like you said, a lot of servers are made from Linux and everything, but as an operating system, is it inherently like faster or more efficient than Windows or Mac?
Right. So the way it's coded, if you think about the way, and I don't want to get drug down too far in the weeds because I don't know how much of your audience is going to care a lot about the nitty-gritty details of an operating system, but if you think about what Windows was, Windows at its core was always designed as a graphical operating system. And so it has a lot of bloat and it's kind of like a patchwork of spaghetti code that has been carried from year to year to year to the point that we have things like blue screens of death and we have things like, oh, that computer froze up. In Linux, we don't have those things because Linux was designed at a very small level. So you have things like TiVos that run embedded Linux, or you have, any of these digital signage boards that you see at Walmart or McDonald's. All of those are running Linux. And what we did was then we built on top of that very, very basic, very stable core, a desktop infrastructure and software and applications and, network audio drivers so we can move audio around just inside of the network so it never actually touches an analog device. All of those things are possible inside of Linux, and it makes for a really, really stable environment. And if you look inside, and this kind of goes what I was talking about where I started to see what radio stations were doing. A lot of radio stations are using a pre-made, pre-built system called Rivendell, which is based on Linux. It's a Linux computer that has software specifically for running a radio station. And my thought was, well, if it can run a radio station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, wonder if I could run a podcast studio like that. And it turns out you can, and it turns out you can get really, really great high quality, high reliability if you're using Linux on the desktop.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. No, see, that to me, that's important to know just as general knowledge of computers. Like I'm happy that you explained it that way. You explained it very well. So let's talk about your studio. Now you're using a PR40 on the boom arm that you really like, which you call YellowTec mica arm, and I'm going to have a list of all the equipment in the show notes, which I always do anyway. But what else is in the studio? How many other mics are there? How many other people are in the studio with you?
So I've got in this studio, I've just got 2 mics. Because I don't very often have an in-studio guest. Every once in a blue moon, I do. But I have access to the radio station, and at the radio station, they actually have a talk studio with 4 mics, or 4 RE20s. And so I just kind of reverse the process. If I ever want to do a show, we've done 1 or 2 where we've had a couple of people, I just drive over to the radio studio and we reverse the process. Instead of me streaming to the radio studio, I send their audio back to my studio, and that's how the audio gets out over the podcast. So we just kind of reverse the flow. But yeah, we have 2. I have 1 other PR40, and then these headphones I really like too. Sony 7506s, I think they are.
Right.
And I've got 2 sets of those. But that's it as far as actual mics and headphones in this studio.
So now, when you produce your show, the Ask Noah show, it's just you doing all this, setting up the OBS and the live stream and sending the audio back to the radio station. Are you doing everything?
Right. And so that plays into, again, why I made some of the decisions I made early on regarding Linux, because I have to, one is remote control is key, right? I have, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Anytime I'm not in the studio, I still have to be able to control all these machines. Second of all, I needed everything to be as automated as possible. So for example, when I come in here, 30 minutes before I go on the air, the playout machine automatically starts playing a pre-show music roll and has little clips of previous shows and stuff like that put in. And then right before the show starts, it has like this little, here's what's coming up this hour. And then it plays that. So the live stream has something to listen to if they're tuning in. So I capture their attention early on, because I know people are going to show up, anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes early. I don't really know when. So I want that going, 30 minutes out. And then the recorder, the Marantz recorder, has a built-in scheduler, so it automatically starts recording whether I'm sitting in front of it or not. So the only thing I really have to do when I get into the studio is turn my microphone on and pop myself up. And at the appropriate time, the pre-show kills itself, and the playout machine plays my intro music, and I start the show. And as far as the only person that helps is I have a call screener, and she listens to, because we have the whole premise of the show is people call and ask technical questions about Linux and computers and stuff like that. And so I have to have somewhat of an idea what they're going to talk about. And so she screens the calls. That's really the only help I have. Other than that, it's a one-man show.
That's awesome. And that half an hour pre-show audio, that's going out on the FM station as well?
No, it's not. The radio station picks this up so our show time is 6 p.m. Central on Tuesdays. The radio show picks us up exactly at 6 o'clock and 10 seconds in. There's a 10-second ID that plays, a legal ID that plays at the station, and then we're live for 59 minutes and 50 seconds, and that's it. And so that poses two issues. First is I absolutely have to be able to have access to a microphone and be either in the studio or access to the studio, no matter what else is going on, or there's silence on the air. And then the second thing is, everything has to be automated because that intro music has to start at exactly the right time.
Right. Yeah, so you automated everything. Now, how did you automate everything?
So there's better ways to do it, and if I had to do it over again, I would do it a different way. There's a software called Airtime, and Airtime basically would give me a web page, and I could go to the web page and just tell it, at this time I want you to play this file, and that time I want you to play that file. If I had to do it over again, that's what I would do. But that's not how it's set up here. It's actually kind of hacky. Basically, what it is there is, in Linux we have something called cron jobs, and basically it's a built-in scheduler that runs inside of Linux, and I can tell it at this particular time do this action, and so I just have it playing VLC with a WAV file at the appropriate time. So there's a 30-minute pre-show WAV file, there's a intro WAV file, there's an outro WAV file, there's cues for the breaks and stuff like that, and it's all being done in Crontab, which is not again, if I had to do it over again, there's better ways to do it, but at the time I was setting it up, that's what we went with.
Yeah, and I mean, if your operating system is really stable, then it works, So
yeah, it works. The issue is changing it, right? Like, so it involves, like, anytime I want to change something, I have to. I feel like an animal. I'm in a terminal and I'm like typing these random commands and stuff to kind of change it. It'd be really nice to have a visual layout and say, okay, this is the time that these things are happening. And it'd be nice to be able to do things like schedule reruns. Right now, that's a huge pain if I wanted to stream reruns out of the studio, because I'd have to write a new job for each hour that I wanted that to happen. And so if I did it over, I'd use Airtime.
Got it. Okay. So now all these, I think you probably have 3 or 4 satellite computers in your studio, meaning there's 3 or 4 computers playing different sounds in your studio.
Right. Yeah. There's 2 that feed audio. Well, yeah, there's one that does the play out for the audio stuff, and then there's one that we call the sound effects machine, and that's on demand audio. I also have a little jack that I use for my laptop, but I rarely ever use it.
Okay. So all those 2 laptops that are playing audio, those 2 computers that are playing audio, they also feed into your Axia console?
Right. So the nice thing about Axia is it supports something called Livewire. And what Livewire is it's basically a branded version of AES-67 network audio. So you can simply install a driver and send the audio over the network into the mixer. Now, the advantage of doing that is if I have a produced WAV file, every time I convert that audio into analog audio, send it over cables, I'm potentially losing quality, but I'm definitely picking up some level of interference. The nice thing about using AES-67, sending it over the network, is you get none of that. It stays pure ones and zeros the entire time until it actually leaves in the radio station, until it actually leaves the air, because they're all running networked audio as well. So from the time that WAV file plays out the computer, it's ones and zeros all the way to the antenna structure that leaves the radio studio.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's never corrupted at all. I love that.
Right.
All right. Well, now let's get into when you're on the road. Like you just said, that your show is a 1-hour show every week. You have to broadcast. There's, it's you're going live one way or the other. So when you're on the road, you were telling me about the Tieline via the remote thing. Tell us about that.
So the VIA is my new love in life. If, however cool, if the Axia is the end all be all audio board for broadcast, then the VIA would definitely be the end all be all device for remote broadcast. And basically, what the VIA is, it's a small box that fits inside of a laptop bag. It has 3 XLR mic preamps. It has a built-in headphone splitter and mixer. So there's an entire matrix. So you can choose, guest 2 wants to hear this thing and that thing, but not the 4th person. It also has built-in cue and talkback functions. So I can press a button and my audio will go to the studio and come out in the board so my call screener can hear me, but that audio is not going out over the air. It also goes the other way. So the call screener can talk back to me and she can say something in my ear, but again, that doesn't go out over the air. The other thing it does, and the thing that you and I were talking about that's indispensable, is that it can encode audio up to and including raw PCM uncompressed audio, which is really what you want anytime you're doing a show, because you get the best sound. Now, there are times where that's not practical, where I don't have the bandwidth to do that, and it has the option of compressing down. But when I can, we try to do it completely raw audio, and that way the listener never knows that I'm actually remote. The other nice thing about it is it supports LTE, it supports Wi-Fi, and it supports dual wired network interfaces. So basically, wherever I am, I can push a button and get on the air.
That's cool. All right, so you got this physical unit that you're bringing with you on the road, and that unit connects to a unit in the studio?
Right. So that's connected. We call it the Merlin. Merlin is made by Tieline as well, but it's basically a rack mount version of the VIA, more or less. And then we have another one that is connecting my studio to the FM studio.
Got it. Right. So I just want to be clear for everyone listening that, we're usually in podcasting, you're connecting with someone, via Skype, or you're using something like Zencastr or Ringer. This, what Noah's describing here is way better quality, and of course a lot more expensive as well. It only goes, it's just one unit that from on the road connects through the internet to the receiving unit in your studio.
Yeah, and the issue with Skype, so part of it, obviously, there's a quality discussion to be had. And it was interesting because when we were talking about coming on this show here, one of the first things you sent me in an email is you're like, I don't really like to use Skype. I like to use something with better audio quality. A lot of people don't really recognize how bad Skype really sounds until you hear it compared to something that doesn't have compression on it. But the other problem is, and again, if you start looking at what it actually takes to do a podcast on the road, to do it properly on the road, if you're going to start with compressed audio, then really you want to do your processing at the on site. So you really want to have a gate, a limiter, a compressor, all that stuff before you feed into the whatever the audio interface that you're going into the studio. So there's a lot of equipment you have to take with you. The nice thing about the VIA is that it's one box. I don't need a microphone and headphones and an audio interface and a mixer and a compressor or a gate and a mic preamp and all that stuff. I mean, I'd fill a huge Pelican case with all that stuff. The only thing I need is the VIA and a headset, or the VIA and a microphone and headphones, whatever. And because it's coming in as raw audio, we can do all of the audio processing back at the studio.
I see. So now wait, when you bring the VIA on location, let's say you're in a hotel room and you plug in the VIA, obviously you have to plug into the internet with a physical Ethernet cable, right? That's obviously the best connection instead of Wi-Fi.
Course.
Yeah. But now when it's sending the audio over the internet, the uncompressed audio, does the internet ever choke up or mess up the signal at all? Like, because, the internet can sort of crap out at times. Does that ever happen?
Yeah. So, and this is kind of what you and I were talking about off air. One of the interesting perspectives that I have gained in doing this is I've worked with a traditional radio studio and I've worked with a podcast network. And what's been frustrating is, on one hand, I am watching the radio station drag their feet behind in technology 15 years because they refuse to use newer modern things. And I've also seen podcasters try to reinvent the wheel with solutions that have problems that have been solved 15 years ago by the radio studios. They just don't want to use those solutions for some reason. And this kind of touches on that, because a lot of people in radio will tell you you can't send audio over the public internet reliably, and that is just plain wrong. The internet has become like hot water. Everyone expects good, reliable internet in places. And really, when you're talking about PCM audio, I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but I think it only requires like 4 or 5 megs. It's not a huge amount of internet that's required. Most wired connections, any place I've ever been, I mean, I usually have a connection of 20, 30 megs plus of downstream, and then, probably 7 to 10 up. So no, I've not had that issue. And I've even done audio from my lake where I'm just going over an LTE modem. Now, to be fair, that's not PCM. I'm using a different codec that does compress the audio, because that's not possible. But no, there's one of the nice things about the Tieline is it has a really decent buffer system where it's quick enough that I can have a two-way conversation. Because remember, the whole show is callers. So I have to, low latency conversation is key. But the Tieline is nimble enough to be able to say, okay, I have to buffer some audio because these packets aren't making it through, or I need to change things up a little bit. But it makes sure that I stay on the air.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. So now when you're on the road, it's easy enough to have a mic and plug it into your VIA and all that. But the space that you're set up in is obviously very important, because it's a studio wherever you are. So
right.
How do you make sure that you're in a good space that's not too echoey and all that? How do you do that?
So there's a couple different tricks you can use. In a hotel, the best thing that I found to do is to take 2 or 3 pillows and set them. There's almost always a desk in there, and take 2 or 3 pillows, put 2 on the side, 1 on the top, and make yourself a little sound box. And I'll put the microphone inside of there. And then I just kind of lean into it and speak. And that has worked that served me really, really well. The other thing is choice of equipment, right? So we talked about, usually in the studio, I'm using an RE20. One of the reasons I have started to play with the PR40 is 2 reasons. One is I would argue that I can make an RE20 sound like any microphone out there. I mean, you name the microphone, and with the right amount of tweaking, if you give me a Symmetrics preamp, and I can adjust it to make it sound just as good as any other microphone. But out of the box, I would argue that a PR40 just sounds better. Just plain, naked, no processing, the PR40 sounds better. And the other thing that the PR40 does really, really well is off-axis rejection. So anytime I'm traveling, if I can use a PR40, it makes the room environment less important.
Right. And you said that your VIA, when you're on location, has 3 preamps. So have you ever set up with 2 other people and done 3 people and live from location?
Absolutely. In fact, I'd say I do about 50% of my shows remotely. And the anytime we have there's different Linux events, and I try to attend all of them. And so anytime we're attending one, obviously that's a great place to make show content. And so anytime I'm there, I'm always doing a show, and there's always people that want to come up and chat or talk, or interesting people that were speakers. And yeah, that is the ability to just plug in a second mic and a second set of headphones and have everything in one box has been absolutely indispensable.
All right, just because I'm curious, we got to talk about the pricing of some of this stuff. So the Tieline VIA, which is what we're talking about, you're bringing on location. Do you buy that separately from the receiver that's in your studio, or do you buy the 2 boxes at the same time?
No, yeah, they're all sold separately. And I'll be honest with you, the pricing on all of these, it's been a little bit, so I'll do the best I can from memory. But I know the VIA is about $4,500. The device that sits inside of the studio, I think, was $3,000. And then again, we've got 2 of those, because I've got one that receives my audio, and then I've got another one that sends it to the radio studio.
Right. All right. Now, how about your Axia Broadcast Console? What price range is that?
Yeah, so the Axia, and it depends on how you order it. So the way they price out the Axia is you can choose what kind of control surface you want, how many faders you want, and then you choose the mix engine. And the mix engine is a variety of prices depending on how many inputs you want and how many outputs you want, those kinds of things. But I think the Axia, we're into it for about $8,000. Okay. Because I think the mix engine was like 6, and then the board was like 3 or 4. Okay. So maybe 9. Maybe closer to 9.
Yeah, but that's good. It gives us something to relate to, as far as that this stuff is a lot higher quality than normal podcasting equipment. And now,
You
go ahead.
If I can, I'll just take a moment and say, so I have, I'm a big fan of Mackie mixers, big fan of Mackie preamps, and I will tell you that, there is a difference. But really, the advantage in the Axia, if I plug this microphone into a good, solid, 1604 Mackie and the Axia and took away all the processing, I don't know that you'd hear a big quality difference. The real advantage to me is the configuration flexibility and the ability to expand, because I can, like I said, a mix minus for every single channel. If you start thinking about that on a traditional audio board, most boards are going to have maybe 4 aux sends total, and that's not a lot of mix minuses. I mean, I have the phones and I've got my IP audio codec. That's 2 of them that have gotten eaten up. So I've got 2 left to go. And, sometimes we'll have 3 or 4 guests.
Right. All right. So now within the Axia, you're saying that there's all the processing is in there, the mix engine.
Right.
So now how do you adjust the settings of that?
A web page, which, and this goes back to what I was talking about being a one-man show, being able to access all of this. I cannot describe how amazing. Just yesterday, the podcast network, they were doing a show and the host got physically locked out of the studio. And so I was talking to my boss about it, and he goes, well, could you vamp some airtime? Could you fill some airtime until they can get themselves back in the studio? I said, no problem. So I logged into the podcast studio and connected them to my studio. And then what I did was, from my house, I used the VIA and logged into the mixer's webpage and said, I want to turn on the IP audio codec, and I want to turn on the studio backfeed from the podcast studio, and I want to set these levels here. And it's like a group community chat, voice chat thing that we have called Mumble. So I want to turn the Mumble on. So I turned that computer on and turned that channel on and potted it up. And I did all of that in a web page. And that's the kind of flexibility that I'm talking about, where I say it just totally stamps out any other kind of console, because how do you do that on an analog board?
Yeah, you don't. So what about, how does Mumble work?
So Mumble is really fantastic. So we're talking about built-in codecs. The latest craze in the codec world is Opus, and Opus is basically an evolution of the Skype Silk codec, and it's built into every Chrome browser, which is really fantastic. Now, the interesting thing about Opus is that Mumble uses the Opus codec, but what Mumble is basically a piece of software. You install it, and it's like Skype in that it's basically two-way audio conversations, but instead of having a conversation with just a single person, there are quote-unquote rooms, and you can go into a room, and so you can have 6, 7, 8 people all in a same room, and then you can all have a conversation. And so my podcast network does a show, a weekly show, where they just invite a bunch of people to come sit out in this community room and talk about Linux.
All right, that's cool. And so you're also, when you're in studio, you're streaming video with OBS software onto YouTube. Do you stream video when you're on the road?
No, well, yes, we do. So the video, when I say video, it's 99.9% of the time, it's just the chat room. And it's just basically, the reason is in order to get eyeballs, you have to be on YouTube these days. And I don't really want to do a video show. If anyone that's out there that's going to start a podcast and they're saying to themselves, I could do an audio only podcast or I could do a video show, which one should I do? Talk to anyone that does video, and they'll tell you that they would go back and kick themselves in the butt for ever introducing video, because once you do it, you can never go back. Your audience will never let you stop. And I don't want to do a video show; the overhead's too much. So there is a video element so that we can go to YouTube, but most of the time it's just the chat room. So yes, that is streamed even when I'm remote. But it's not like it's capturing it's not like it's capturing like actual video.
Okay. And how I've heard a lot about OBS and that it's a good streaming program, and it's also free, I believe.
Right.
Is it really easy to use?
Yeah, so if the proprietary alternative would be something like Wirecast, and my podcast network, they used to use Wirecast, and it caused so many problems and was so difficult to work with and had so many issues that they eventually dumped it in replacement of OBS. And they've had some issues with the computer for different reasons, but OBS itself has been rock solid. OBS, to answer your question, how difficult it is, You open the program up, you put in your stream key for YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're gonna stream to, and you click the start streaming button, and that's it. And then there's a record button if you want to record it as well. I mean, it's super, super brain dead simple to set up. The nice thing about OBS is that they expose a lot of the underpinnings. A lot of the source code is available, and so a lot of the underpinnings are available. And so using that, we were able to do some really creative things. So we rent a server, and what we do is we send our video stream up to that server, and then that server, using a program called Nginx, re-encodes that video stream and sends it to a bunch of different places. So it sends it to our podcast website, it sends it to YouTube, it sends it to our CDN that then re-embeds the video, and we can send it to a bunch of different destinations, and we're only occupying the bandwidth of sending one single stream.
Yeah, that is cool. So what is that a service, or did you create that server? Did you create that?
Yeah, we built it, but if there is anyone interested, I can either send you I can send you some links or people, you can put my contact info, and I'd be happy to share exactly how we set the thing up. And it only took about once you know how to set it up, it's basically just you would copy and paste the configuration file that we wrote and tweak it to your stream settings. But you could have it up and running in 5 minutes.
Wow. So you're in your studio, you stream one channel of a stream up to that server, and then that server sends it to YouTube and Twitch and everywhere else.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and that also works on the road, obviously. Well, no, because when you're on the road, only your voice is going back to the studio, but then everything from the studio is going up to the server.
Exactly, and it's all being mixed in the Axia, and then I have a studio feed coming back to me over the Tieline.
Right, and with the Axia, even when you're on the road, you can open up the web page and tweak the settings.
Exactly. I can tweak the settings, or I can even add sources. That was the mumble room wasn't, because I don't participate in that particular show. And so yesterday I had to add a source, and I just went in there and said, I want to add this source. It's connected here. I mean, obviously it has to be physically plugged in, but I want to add this source. I want to add it to this channel, and I want to turn that channel on, and I want to send a mix minus back to myself.
So now what about when you're on the road and your studio's up and running? Do any of the computers in your studio ever have to be rebooted, or what if the power goes out, or how do you handle problems like that?
So we have UPS on the computers. If we have a power outage for more than 15 minutes, knock on wood, it hasn't happened. I don't have a great plan for that. The computers are set inside of the BIOS to automatically power themselves back on in the event of a power failure. And again, going back to one of the reasons we chose Linux, it's stable and secure enough that I can trust them to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without ever having to restart them. So no, I never plan to restart them. In fact, the machine that's sitting right in front of me that's doing the guest thing, from the time that I've installed the operating system, it's never been turned off. Oh,
wow. All right. Well, what's in the future for you, Noah? Are you planning on getting any new gear or anything?
Gear-wise, I think I'm sitting pretty happy. I would like to, at some point, build out a more complete on-location kit that has maybe 3 microphones and 3 headphones, and maybe get some little webcams so that we can see what's going on inside of a fest or something like that. But the real future of the show, the real direction of the show is to spend more time promoting the show, spend more time talking about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And really, why I started the show to begin with was to help people. I wanted to take, my 15 years of working in the IT industry and give back to people that are trying to get started and start their business, and help them with, their network problems and computer problems, and introduce people to Linux. I want to do more of that. And so to do that, I think it's going to involve going to more places, doing more on-location broadcasts.
Right. Well, that's great. So everybody can go listen to the Ask Noah show. And what's your website, Noah?
AskNoahShow.com. I know, really difficult.
Yes, AskNoahShow.com. The link will be in the show notes as well. So, Noah, I'm really happy you could come on the show, man. This is just kind of blowing my mind, like the level at which you're producing your show. It's awesome, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's interesting because it's difficult to find people that want to do podcasting well, and that's what you're doing. That's what you're showing people how to do. There's I had a conversation just 2 weeks ago, and somebody said, "Well, why did you spend all that money building the studio? Couldn't you just buy a Blue Yeti and plug a USB cable in and go in the air. And yes, we all know how to do that, but those of us that have done that know what the limitations of that are, and we don't want to go back to that.
Yeah, and plus, you're making a commitment to yourself that your show is going to be of high quality. It's going to be around for a while. And it's not just, you're trying something. It's not like, let's try a podcast. It's like, no, dude, you're investing a lot of money in really good equipment, and because it's serious. And so your results end up being serious, that's the whole point.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, we've done 50. I think we just finished our 42nd episode, and we've not yet done an episode where we haven't filled the hour with phone calls. So the show it's definitely resonating with people. It is definitely filling a need, and like you said, it's kind of that you reap what you sow. If you put a lot of effort and you put high quality stuff in from the beginning, you get high quality results out.
All right, we're going to end on that note. That's awesome. So Noah Chelliah, the Ask Noah Show. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and at the very end here, you have to yell out, "Sound great." Did you know that?
I'm ready.
Yeah, when you hear, you're ready. Okay. Yep. So thank you for listening. Thank you for checking out the Podcast Engineering Show. Check out all our other sessions, all kinds of good stuff. I'm here to help you. Contact me if you have any questions. Here we go, Noah. Sound great.
Sound great.